Okay, so I'm going to start this. So as I said, there'll be this long introduction, and then I'll say, with me today is Beverly Sunn, and then that'll be followed by a description of who this amazing person is. And then I say, welcome to Conversation 360 Podcast and this Asia and the West series, Beverly. And,
Good morning.
And you can say, yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Good
So,
to be here.
so Beverly, when we talk about conversations taking place between Asia and the West, what does that bring to mind for you? What does that mean?
Well, I think it's not a new conversation or a new topic for myself, given that when I first arrived in Asia and went through certain challenges and moving into Asia, I saw that there was a need to bridge that gap. So, in fact, set up a business which would support newcomers, largely from the West, moving into firstly Hong Kong and later in China in the early 90s. And that was to ensure that people who came to Asia would have a very successful transition in understanding the culture to which they've come through real estate and through support services, now called mobility services.
Boy, you were a pioneer in that.
That's right. I did pioneer the service, and frankly, being a woman and with, of course, an American and with an Asian background, felt that I could put the piece together, understanding the nuances of the U.S. as well as Asia through my.
So born in Hawaii, being brought up in Hawaii, then you went to school at the Boston University?
Correct.
And then, was that when it struck you to start this business? When did you get this brainstorm?
No, it was when I arrived in the early 80s in Asia and understood that it was very challenging to move to Asia and with no support, and understood at that time that there was very little representation of clients, in fact, because the money in real estate was really with developers. And so look to represent corporations with a sense of openness and transparency and ethics. So I actually became a tenant rep when I initiated the business to assist multinationals who didn't have the wherewithal or didn't have the insights into the community at that time.
So when did you get the other side of this as well? When did Chinese companies look to you to help them go to the West?
Well, more recently, in fact, 30 years ago, when I was asked what my vision was, and that was to bring companies into Asia, and at one point in time, that we would be able to help the Chinese who would want to go overseas, either in real estate or to move their companies into other parts of the world. So it's in the last few years, as you've seen, multinationals, Chinese multinationals moving outside of China, that we've been asked to assist them with their requirements in different parts of the world, Europe, South America, the U.S. So it's been quite exciting for us to see that. It does take time, as you can see. It's just 30 years.
But it sounds like you were truly prescient, because this is an idea that you thought it would end up being by
a reality. That's right. So when I first arrived in Asia, you could just see the excitement. China was just opening up, and I've spent many trips into China and just excited by the entire prospect of seeing change. And the opening of China was very exciting to me. And those were very early days. But culturally, there's an enrichment from my perspective. To be able to interface in China, and I've seen nothing but extreme and rapid change, as we all know. China now being the second largest economy and perhaps even the first globally.
So how do you think, how accurate is the Chinese understanding of the West?
I think they've been very one must understand it's only been 25 years that China had to, in fact, build its own economy. I think they have been very fastidious and paced in terms of looking to understand the West. I think, if anything, they've looked to bridge into the West through their investments. If I look at China today, given that there is a relationship between the U.S. and China, of allowing Chinese to visit, for instance, the U.S., they have now 10-year visas.
It's amazing.
And it's reciprocal. I think that's a certain openness that we don't talk about, but that led to over 90 million people leaving China as tourists in 2016.
Which a decade prior to that was almost non-existent.
Non-existent. I think during the entire period from 40s until the early 90s, 200,000, I think fewer than 200,000 people left China to visit the West.
Amazing, amazing. So how about the other way around? How well does the West understand China?
I think it's looking to understand China. I think it's been a little bit slower. I very often, when you are the dominant player economically, you tend to be a little bit more centric about your capabilities. Slowly, I believe that there's been more meeting of the minds, and I think that course will have to continue through dialogue and communication. So it will take time, but I do see improvements in some ways. Of course, am concerned that we continue with this pace, because I do feel that these two major economies are very critical in terms of sustainability and globalization. At a time where this is not necessarily a catchword given where we are with the U.S. election.
So what you're really saying is that,
president.
Yeah, we really need to be collaborative, and it's not clear that that's the intention.
I think
that's concerning many people, I think. So let's also talk about what's on the mind of a lot of people who study China, or at least read about China, think about it, and that is the recent slowdown of some note in the Chinese economy. Has that had, what kind of impact has that had? How important is that?
I think the slowdown, mind you, we've gone from double digit, no economy globally has been in double digit in terms of growth. So it's quite remarkable. I think people who come to China are so amazed with the changes. And if one comes with an open mind, then you can only really be in praise of what this government has done to bring basic needs to its population. There are always issues, given that this is a 1.3 billion population. However, to think of the great strides they've made in a short 25 years is just remarkable.
So what about this, though, that it has slowed? Does that have an impact? Do people care about it? Are they concerned about it?
I think people are concerned, but mind you, we're still in, even if you speak about 6% growth.
Still high.
It's still higher than any other, in other parts of the world, they're in negative growth. In the U.S., I think we're speaking about 3%, so it's still double of what the U.S. projects. So the slowdown is healthy, in as much as I think there was just great attention given to growth, but now it can reflect a little bit more. It can pay attention to some of the more urgent needs, which would be the environment, and also correcting issues that we speak about, openly corruption. I think government has taken great strides to review this, and also not just a review, in fact, to really implement a program where it corrects some of the happenings in a fast, rapid growing economy.
So what about the individuals in China, though? It sounds like it makes a great deal of sense what you're saying. But for people who have seen nothing but extreme, exciting growth for several decades, do they have any pause here? Is there a reason for them to suddenly be nervous about whether this is sustainable, or do they really get it, that this is a good thing?
I think if you speak of the younger population, the millennials, I think they see the slowdown. There is guarded optimism. However, I think everyone is so tenacious about continuing with some amount of prosperity for themselves, for their families, and that they will stay very focused on maintaining whatever gain they've made. There is reserve in terms of the slowdown. By the same token, perhaps then there will be more time for reflection in terms of their achievements and pay a great deal more attention to the environment and the sustainability of their futures. So I don't see the negativism coming through. I just see a pause to reflect.
This whole issue of the environment that you've mentioned a couple of times, it seems to me especially that young people in China do seem to be not only aware of it, but vocal about it. That's kind of a new thing, isn't it, for Chinese to really speak up and say, this is a problem, we need to do something about this? Are they just very selective in the things that they do voice against authority, or am I not understanding how that works?
I think you'll see that people are much more vocal than they were, and what they need to do is to be able to do this constructively, and to work with the municipalities to ensure that there is sustainable change. Government itself is looking to curb through laws now, and it's not just having the laws. China probably has more laws than any other country, but it's the implementation of the law and the enforcement. So with that, I think people are starting to see changes. In Shanghai alone, the municipality has started a program last year of $20 billion to look to work towards improving the environment, cleaning the water, cleaning soils, and to look to curb the fuel emissions, and to make improvements in Shanghai. So you can already see changes. So when the populace can feel and that there is a change, then there is a positive reinforcement in meeting their needs that I think is reinforcing for the populace at large.
And when you said, did you say 30 billion?
20 billion.
20 billion, is that RMB?
It's RMB.
Yeah, okay. So some do say, though, that China's brightest and wealthiest, some of them are leaving China and going elsewhere. Do you see that in your business? I would think you'd be highly aware of that if that were the case.
I think there is a reserve, and there is also an interest to be global citizens, and there's no reason for individuals not to consider other alternatives when they have that massive wealth. As we saw in Hong Kong, when there was a handover in the 60s, there was concern. So there's always the concern about having insurance. In the U.S. now, you look at the number of applicants who are interested in moving to Canada after the election. So I think, to all in balance, there are always, if you have the means, and people do look at alternatives. This is nothing new. So I'm not concerned about that. I think when you have wealth, you have alternatives.
So it sounds like most of people are sticking around, and for those who do, the future seems to be a crucial requirement, I would think, is for China, especially since it's moving from this manufacturing-based economy to another one, that the innovation is going to be especially crucial. So where will that come from? Is that going to be homegrown? In the past, we used to look at expats who would come to places like China and give their expertise or share their expertise, and it would come from that, or it might come from young people educated in the West. What's your thinking around that?
I think much of the talent will be homegrown. It's a matter of numbers. You have the capacity now, technology, with the research centers, and it's just the numbers, the volume, the young brain power that's coming together. I remember 5 years ago, people speaking about China as being copycats. Well, they're more than copycats now. They moved away from that stereotype and creating beyond what we might be doing in the U.S. I understand with certain smartphones, they're ahead of the U.S. by years in terms of what they were able to produce. And companies in China are going to various pockets of China, creating research and development centers, and are getting tremendous amount. It's just numbers, volume of people, young, bright people. The educational level in China is so high, and they're highly motivated. They are willing to work hard. The concept of a balanced life comes perhaps over a lifetime versus over a quarter. It's a different concept philosophically, culturally, because people are hungry to succeed. They're not hungry for themselves. They're hungry for not only themselves, but their families around them. It's not individualistic, it's collective. So with that in mind, it multiplies to a greater extent.
Not individualistic, it's collective. That's highly important, because that's really a very values-based philosophy that has great ramifications.
How could China have succeeded as rapidly as it had, irrespective of government incentives, irrespective of government control, unless you had a population that collectively had the drive to reinforce growth?
So
It's an interactive process. You can't command that people work hard. You can't command that you can take them you can take the horse to the water. You can't have the horse drink the water unless there's a value proposition collectively, the rapid speed. Nowhere else in the world could do that culturally.
I think you're so right about that. So let's just talk about these millennials, especially in contrast to the millennials that we all know in the West, because you know people on both sides of the pond. How are they different, these young people?
I think there's still a commitment. Again, if we speak of the millennials in the U.S., you speak about individual. I guess it's culturally based. You speak about individualism, and in China, when I speak to people younger age who are millennials, they're concerned about their parents. They're concerned. Obviously, it was a one-child policy, so many of them have no siblings, and even those, and for those who have, they're concerned about their siblings. They're concerned about their parents, their relatives. I don't think you necessarily have that cultural commitment in an individualistic society where it's more self-centered. It's about your own success, not necessarily the next person. So there is a responsibility that is ingrained in the DNA of society. It will change as all cultures do, but I think it'll take a lot to undo that commitment to collectivism. That's its strength at the moment.
So you sound ultimately pretty bullish about China.
I am. I'm guarded. I think it'll be important that dialogue of countries continue, and that I do believe that there is greater interest in the existing government to ensure that there is continued growth for people. I think overall, when you go into China and you spend time in China, people are working towards even a greater goal, but have greater comforts than they would have 30 years ago. The millennials never dreamed that they could have what they have today. And they're very much, I would say, globalized. They may not have all the exposure and the experience, but that will come rapidly. When they visit the U.S., they're not going there but to bring home souvenirs. Souvenirs are the values that they learn. Going to the metropolitan, having the best of cuisine, experiencing the culture of people, the interactiveness of it, and they take home the souvenir of values which they contribute to their own children. their own families. They take home vitamins. That's the priority.
That's interesting. So what about the issue when you talk about the differences that they would be aware of? What about the whole issue of privacy? You know, Westerners, especially Americans, are so concerned with people getting hold of their data, that their need for privacy. I don't see that when I talk with people in China. Is that something that will change?
When we speak of privacy, I think individuals are cautious historically for historical reason. But when you speak of communications, or if I look at WeChat, it's just so driven with openness and transparency in terms of what it offers, that I'm not sure that will be the same issue that we have in the West in terms of privacy.
That
there's a certain discretion which will continue because that's cultural. You share amongst those that you know.
So are you saying that they'll get more concerned about being able to maintain their own privacy of data, or will they'll be less concerned? Not sure I understood your answer.
I don't think it's a major concern. I think of the millennials, that there be privacy. You look at Facebook, you look at WeChat. There is a certain openness and ability to communicate, and that, I think, takes precedent over the privacy. It's the desire for more information, to share information, to create groups through technology, and it may replace some of the older methodologies of communication. People don't speak on the phone any longer. They just WeChat. They use technology.
It is ironic that, at least in the West, people have this great concern about people getting hold of their data, and yet they'll put anything, including pictures and videos of themselves, on the web for exposure to others. So there's a little bit of a schizophrenic response to what's yours and what's not.
Well, I think we politically and culturally in the U.S. looked at privacy as being a very important element. In a place such as China, I think we're moving beyond that now, and this is a game changer through technology.
Game changer in what way?
In terms of having access globally, to having access to information instantly. I think the concern really is really about having information that's accurate. That's the challenge, not having information, because it is open. And then now, as we see through technology, the false information that's given online, or misleading, that I think is the concern. So people will learn to, either you have the larger corporations looking to prevent that, which they are working on now. Mm-hmm. People never dreamed that would have such a major influence on people's lives. False information.
False information, you're so right. It's almost as if we haven't caught up with the technology. We're still thinking in another way. So when you talk about being bullish about China, what would you say is the real basis for your excitement about it, that you think it will be so positive? You were mentioning the young people and this collective drive they have. What else makes you feel they're going to pull this off?
Well, if I spend a great deal of time in China and I see the growth of what it offers culturally, the education that people now have, 92% of them have gone through minimal high school, and they're all now, vast majority of them have gone to university, so there's a high level of education there. There's also culturally, China is looking to infuse classical music into the culture. I think that's such important, it's symbolic of what they're looking to do. I spent a great deal of time, and I'm committed to the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra, which is very innovative. Its artistic director, Yu Long, is an icon.
You brought up
Fine.
education. I just want to ask you a question about that, because in the past I would be told by people, China's problem is that in the lower grades they have this rote system of learning, and so that is not an encourager of independent thought. And yet, despite that, it appears that innovation is flourishing. So that isn't such a problem, or are they really moving away from that rote learning? And
I'm not in that sector, but I've been told by people who are in education, who have visited China, and they're just startled by their progressiveness in education, and what they're looking to do through being innovative.
so let's look at the other side of this. So what are the big challenges that could get in the way of China being able to sustain the trajectory it's on? What are the big challenges that give you some pause?
I think the challenge would be, of course, corruption. And so that's a very important aspect. I think also the ability to separate the law.
Separate the law?
The law from governments, that there be a check and balance over time, which will come over time. At the moment, just remember, we're only 25 years away from being an impoverished country of 1.3 billion. It's just remarkable how it's grown. So I continually see improvements in the community with them, and I would say the optimism and the willingness to work towards a goal where individuals are able to flourish.
Are the things that keep you from being too concerned about the challenges, large as they may be?
I would say yes, because government, and you see they themselves are looking to make major changes. In fact, recently they've issued new laws in terms of factories and ensuring that they make changes to minimize pollution as well. So looking to be responsible. It's a huge sector to tackle, but they're addressing it.
And there's the healthcare system. We haven't even talked about
The
that.
healthcare system will be one that government will have to, China will have to look at as well.
It's huge. So Beverly, are there other issues that you'd want to mention regarding this whole Asia and the West ability to
Well,
collaborate?
I think I don't see China as looking to be aggressors in a global arena. I do see that and think it's important that the U.S. maintain a dialogue with China, because I do believe that will be these two countries that will take us forward in the globalization. So that I'm certainly committed to, and I think we all need to think about that and be a priority when we think about the world and where we want humanity to be in the next 2, 3, 4 generations.
Well, and I get the sense that what governments can't or don't do together, maybe on a very local, very individual level, the kind of thing that we're even engaging in right now, this kind of conversation that helps us get smarter about what other people are thinking is critically important.
Well, I think the U.S. is such a wonderful country, and we've had the benefit of a very strong economy. And we're large ourselves, so we've never really had to look beyond our borders historically. And this is where I've said I think governments and corporations might have done a better job 20, 25 years ago in terms of branding and education of the value of globalization, and also finding alternatives for those jobs that were going to be taken away, because there are many alternatives, but we would have had to focus on offering those alternatives.
Yeah, globalization has turned in some people's minds into a bad word, when in fact it's
That's right.
It's the answer to most of us. Well, this is a good place to stop, I think. I want to thank you, Beverly, for being so generous and giving us your insights, and thanks for taking part.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Susan.